I want to welcome everybody back to meeting number 123 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy, and Ethics. Again, a reminder about the earpieces. Make sure they're approved. And when you're not using the earpieces, make sure they're in the proper place. When we last left, we were on an amendment to a motion. The amendment was put forward by Mr. Barrett, and the amendment says that the committee order Global Health Imports to submit the names of all past and present employees in order to reveal the identity of the other Randy referred to by Minister Randy Boissonnault within 7 days of this motion being adopted. And I do have a list. I intervened when Ms. Khalid had the floor. So we'll start with Ms. Khalid. We'll then go to Ms. Damoff, Mr. Green, Mr. Bennett, Mr. Barrett, and then Monsieur Villemure. Okay, so Ms. Khalid, go ahead. On the amendment.
Thank you very much, Chair. I really appreciate that. And I may not have the eloquence of speaking the way that Mr. Barrett does, and I may not have the litigation experience that Mr. Brock does, but one thing I do have, Chair, is decency. I really would not do to my colleagues what my colleagues do to me, and I know that yesterday Mr. Barrett posted a clip of me on social media taking completely out of context what I was saying. So I would like to, for the record, just reiterate what it was that I was trying to get across. And that is, in this committee, we are tasked with a certain thing, and we need to bring it tighter in together. Sure, if the Conservatives have allegations to make, let's bring that in here, and that's what this motion is about. But what I do not appreciate is the dehumanization of members of this committee, of private citizens that I've seen in the past come in here and be faced with just allegations and just outright conjecture. And I don't think that that is helpful to what we are trying to achieve collectively as a committee. And I've said this many times, Chair, that I am willing to work with all of our colleagues on consensus. Because ultimately, we're all here, hopefully, we are all here to make sure that Canadians are well represented and that our democracy is well supported through our parliamentary system. And the behavior of my colleagues with respect to creating that conjecture, with creating false scandals, it's not right, absolutely not right. You know, once again, we see the Conservatives wanting to go on an overboard fishing expedition, and that's what I think this amendment has really been all about. And I raised these points yesterday only to be taken out of context on a 2-second clip. Let's not do that to each other. What the Conservatives are proposing, which is a comprehensive order with absolutely no consideration for the privacy or the safety of everyday Canadians. And I think that we are obligated as a committee to ensure that the people that we bring in on this committee have both. Asking an employer to reveal the identities of every single employee this company has ever had, it is the definition of overboard. It is way too broad of an amendment for us to consider while we're considering this issue at hand. It would include individuals who, perhaps because they left the company, would have nothing to do with these text messages. And for what purpose? Why would we make that public? Yesterday at committee, I raised a legitimate argument, Chair, about employment law, the rights of workers and the responsibilities of employers to protect the privacy of our employees. I would not subject my employees to this kind of, I don't even know what to call it, Chair. And I think, yes, exactly, Mr. Brock. It is a witch hunt that you guys are please don't chirp at me, Chair. Chair, if you can.
Mr. Brock, we're not intervening. Ms. Khalid has the floor. And that's what I expect today from all members, is that when you have the floor, that will be respected. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that intervention, Mr. Chair. I really appreciate it. Chair, your response to the concerns that I raised yesterday was accurate to a point, but with respect, it didn't respond to the actual point of the question. You explained how committees have significant power to request documents from government, from organizations, and from Canadians, and I absolutely accept that. That is the power of Parliament. But the question is not whether we have this significant power. The question is, what is our responsibility with that power? If every time the Conservatives want to go on a fishing expedition, we're going to start issuing massive orders to organizations to turn over employee information, that is something that I want no part of. And I do not want this committee to set that precedent whatsoever. I don't think it is the right approach of how we conduct ourselves and how we represent Canadians here. Who are we going to be implicating in all of this? The administrative assistant that organized the email 4 years ago? The 21-year-old summer intern that helped out with answering phone calls? This is not a responsible way of going about this. If we were to let the Ethics Commissioner look into this matter, that might be the more responsible approach, Chair. When his office conducts a review, he does so privately and for good reason, for all of those that I just outlined. So if he's going to take a look at the employees of this company, they can be assured that their privacy will be respected, as it should, as our laws in this land make sure that privacy is respected. And the Ethics Commissioner has already told us that he needs to decide whether an investigation is warranted. So why not just let him do that? The reality is, Mr. Chair, that the Conservatives aren't interested in the opinions of the independent officer of Parliament. They're interested in turning this committee into a partisan circus, and they have no regard whatsoever about the innocent individuals that they drag into this. And that is absolutely unfair to Canadians. So I have to ask what the Conservatives' real goal is here. On one hand, they're saying that all they really want is the surname of this individual. And then on the other hand, they're calling all kinds of additional witnesses and requesting all kinds of additional names. Mr. Barrett seems to acknowledge in his remarks yesterday the incredible overstep of dragging regular Canadians before this committee. They suggest that they are concerned about who this other Randy is. Okay, well, if that's the focus, then why do we need these long hearings? Why do we need Ms. Poon? She isn't mentioned in these text messages. We don't need the names of the intern or the person in the that emails the office. We don't need the names of any additional people named Randy that may have worked for this company in the past, in the present, in the future. What we need, however, is Mr. Anderson, who spoke to on that day, as to who Mr. Anderson spoke to on that day. So maybe the solution is this, that we simply request that Mr. Anderson turn over his phone records and text messages for September 8, 2022. Now, the minister has shown his phone records. We can ask Mr. Anderson to do the same. This will show whether or not he texted or called the minister on that day. We have seen from the minister's records that there is no such phone call, so why not we check both? And I think that that would be a very reasonable way to continue to protect the privacy of Canadians and to make sure that we are doing our work here in this committee. we should receive that information, and it shows no communication, and should we receive that information and it shows no communication with the minister, there would be no need to drag these witnesses before the committee to face abuse. And I've seen witnesses face abuse in this committee, Mr. Chair. We would have our answer about whether or not the minister was called or texted. But I have a rather bad feeling that the Conservatives want more than the facts. They want angry social media clips. They want to tar and feather these witnesses in public view and then send a fundraising email bragging about it. That's the method of operation. I've been a victim of this too. So let's see if that's right, Mr. Chair. Let's see if they're interested in evidence or if they're interested in politics. I suspect that the Conservatives aren't interested in the actual evidence because they are disregarding the real evidence that we have. It comes from Minister Boissonneau's phone records from September 8 of 2022. We can see very clearly on those phone records that there are no calls between 11:12 a.m. Pacific time and 5:37 p.m. Pacific time. Mr. Chair, that covers entirely the time frame that Global News talks about in its coverage and the time frame that Mr. Cooper talked about at length during the minister's appearance. Under that time frame, everyone involved was supposed to be on a quote-unquote partner call at 12:30 Pacific time. Clearly, from this phone record, Minister Boissonneau was on no such call. An examination of Mr. Anderson's phone records would, I think from this, show no call from the minister either. Let's also remember, Chair, that on September 8, 2022, Minister Boissonneau was in Vancouver attending a cabinet retreat with wall-to-wall meetings where ministers lock up their cell phones on a day that was especially hectic because it was the day that Queen Elizabeth II had passed away. May she rest in peace. This was real evidence, Mr. Chair, but the Conservatives are just disregarding it to the point where Mr. Cooper has ridiculously suggested that the minister had some kind of burner phone that he used. Like, how conspiratorial can we actually get here? So the question is, are they going to accept to see the evidence? Let's see. So with that, Mr. Chair, I would like to move a sub-amendment to Mr. Barrett's amendment as proposed yesterday to say that the committee, deleting the words, order Global Health Imports to submit the names of all past and present employees in order to reveal the identity of the other quote-unquote Randy referred to by Minister Randy Boissonneau, and replace those words with request that Stephen Anderson produce for the committee all of his phone records and text messages from September 8, 2022, and to keep the words at the end within 7 days of this motion being adopted.
Okay. Have you shared the sub-amendment with the clerk, Ms. Khalid?
Yes, I will just flip it over right now.
Okay, so I want to make sure that this is in everybody's hands.
Point of order, Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Kurek, on your point of order.
So if, just to make sure that we understand exactly what Ms. Khalid is proposing, might be best to suspend for a few minutes, because certainly I'd like to see some text.
I was moving in that direction, and I'm sure members want to see the sub-amendment. I need to talk. Okay, I need to talk to the clerk. So let's suspend for a couple of minutes until everybody has it. The sub-amendment as proposed by Ms. Khalid has been sent out to the members of the committee. It is in order because it's in relation to finding out who Randy is, potentially. So we are on the sub-amendment by Ms. Khalid. So I've got Mr. Green first, and then I'm going to go to Mr. Kurek. Go ahead, Mr. Green, on the sub-amendment, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And you're quite right. I think the heart of the matter of where we're at right now is trying to find out who this Randy is, the person I affectionately call the alibi Randy. And there's been lots of kind of bizarre twists and turns of this committee just trying to get to the heart of the matter when, quite frankly, whether it was the minister or the company in question, and I respect that the minister would have to say, of course, that he wouldn't have any knowledge of anybody inside this company. But we've heard arguments from the governing side here, from the Liberal Party, that somehow disclosing this information is a grave violation of privacy, that it, of course, is what has been equated to some kind of circus. But I would say in this particular case, the circus is of the minister's making. This is a company, just to recap, millions of dollars in contracts, something like $8 million, allegations of fraud, which, to my understanding, publicly reported, haven't been even defended. And then, just the whole structure of the way in which a minister has such a close relationship to this day, it doesn't pass the smell test, quite frankly. And really all of this, and I'll say it again, could have been avoided if the real Randy just stood up. If the company just said, this is Randy, this is what Randy does, this is Randy's contract, it would have all gone away. And now to go down some rabbit hole about phone records, while I think maybe the use of the term burner phone perhaps may come off a bit dramatic, the truth is it would be expected that a minister it would be expected that most members of parliament would have their own personal phone lines. Of course they would, because you wouldn't want to conduct anything personal or non-business related, on your cabinet cell phone. So I'm unwilling to accept all of the drama around time zones and cabinet retreats and fairway boxes and all of these different types of things. I'm simply interested in finding out officially who this Randy is, who is alibi Randy. Because absent of alibi Randy, I would say the minister has dug himself into quite a hole here. And on the surface of it, he lacks credibility in his testimony. On the surface of it, the stories that have been reported, which are publicly reported, have not yet been refuted, I think, in a meaningful way, that a minister would even want to be tangentially related and connected to a company as nuclear as this in this moment seems beyond my understanding. Wouldn't answer basic questions about payouts, was obstructionist, obfuscated what I think were very straightforward questions. And for that reason, we're in this point. And I would have liked to have heard from the Gowie company. I would have liked to heard from all the witnesses to get to the heart of the matter, because if it is the case that this story, as convoluted and bizarre as it is unfolding, was technically legally allowed, we have problems. Because the average person, the objective person on the outside looking at this, given the facts that have been reported, given the lack of any kind of, I think, substantive defense by the minister and by this company, I think it puts it all at risk, quite frankly. And anytime there's a scandal in this committee, I believe the general public, they don't discern necessarily about whether it's liberal, conservative bloc, or New Democrat. In their minds, I believe they just see all politicians as being corrupt. And that kind of broad brush, we've heard it today in the arguments from the Liberal side, that they're now being pulled into this. Why? Why are you allowing yourselves to be pulled into this mess when it's not your mess? You are not receiving deferred payments from this company. You do not have a 50% interest in a company that had almost $8 million in contracts, and as I understand, are being pursued for various allegations of fraud. That's not your mess. So why you're kind of, putting in the extra overtime work to try to make this go away doesn't make sense to me as a New Democrat. And while I appreciate the way in which social media, personal attacks, ad hominem attacks, information that's taken out of context has a direct impact on the way we do our business, this simply could have been solved absent of the filibuster last meeting, with straightforward answers, and with a minister who was willing to take responsibility and accountability for the role and involvement that they had in this company, whether or not they were in contact with them. Because what we have to do as a committee when this is done, hopefully, is provide recommendations to close whatever gaps and loopholes seem to exist and that are present here. So for that reason, Mr. Chair, I certainly will not be supporting this amendment. I don't want to go down this kind of bizarre rabbit hole of forensic auditing of people's phone accounts, assuming that they only have one phone line. I don't know what Randy's number was before he was a minister. I don't know what phones he has or doesn't have. I don't think we have the power to investigate that. And this notion that we're just going to take their word for it, quite frankly, doesn't cut it. It just doesn't cut it. I'm unwilling to do that. And I have no ill will towards Mr. Boissonnault or my Liberal colleagues here. I get along with them, I think. We work together. I work together with members on the opposition side to hold government accountable. That ultimately is our role. And again, all of this can be solved for the people that are watching, for Mr. Boissonnault, for the people who are connected to this company, to proactively disclose who Alibi Randy is. And that to me would have been the simplest thing to do a week ago to make all this go away. Say, my name is Alibi Randy, and this is who I am. This is what my job is. Here's my contract. Here's how long I've been working. Case closed. We can move on. But all of this extra effort, I'm telling you, and I said this to the minister, I'm going to say it to my Liberal colleagues, it doesn't look great. It just doesn't look good from where I sit. And that is certainly not anywhere close to a Conservative caucus, but as an objective person of this committee, from where I sit, the more you all dig in on this, the worse it's going to look for everybody involved. So let's avoid all that. Let's have Alibi Randy stand up, maybe even do an interview, talk about the good work of this company, maybe perhaps provide some kind of defense to the kind of allegations that have been thrown their way. I don't think they've done that in court yet. And let's move on. But I'm not going to be party to, some procedural shenanigans or anything else, some sub-amendments to an amendment that will take us off track and ultimately try to obstruct or delay or frustrate just getting to a basic answer. So I don't intend to participate much more in this meeting beyond this. I just want to go on the record and be very clear where I stand. I support this. I think it's a reasonable motion Mr. Barrett put forward. And I think it could all be solved if this company just took some accountability for once and some responsibility and disclosed who Alibi Randy is. Because what I'm telling you right now, and I'm just going to say it, you all have had your time for your filibusters, so I'm going to have mine right now. I don't think there's a Randy. There it is. There it is, folks. I don't think there's another Randy, and I think that's why we're in this mess. And now it's left for Mr. Boissonnault and his colleagues at this company that he no longer supposedly has any dealings with, but still receives 50% ownership and ostensibly payouts to the extent that we aren't fully clear about. I don't think there's a Randy, and the onus is going to be on this company to prove there is, not on us to prove there isn't. Thank you.
Okay, we are on the sub-amendment. I've got Mr. Kurek, followed by Ms. Damoff, and I see your hand, Mr. Housefather, on the sub-amendment. Mr. Kurek.
Thanks very much, Chair. And, I always find it interesting because quite often I hear from my Liberal members of this committee that they're concerned that that we're distracted doing other things, and that they want to get back to the hard work of what this committee is doing. And I know we have some reports and whatnot that are sitting on the table. Yet here we are into a multiple meeting filibuster by Liberals based on the answer to what initially, when posed by the media, by Conservative members, and by other opposition parties, what seemed at the time to be a pretty simple question. Who is this Randy that's in question? And yet we now have parliamentary resources, hours and hours of committee time, and the Liberals are doing backflips, trying to make excuses and to muddy the waters, to say, okay, well, phone records, but not witnesses, this, but not that, and the other thing. And it all comes down to a very, very, very simple question. Who is this individual referred to as Randy in these text messages? I don't understand, and it is truly bewildering, Chair, that the Liberals would burn so much political capital, that they would burn so much time, and that they would spend so much energy trying to equivocate on this very, very simple question and turn a simple question into a scandal. While the Liberals are blaming opposition parties for asking these questions and suggesting that maybe there's something to hide here. Well, Mr. Chair, the reason why we are asking these questions is because the Liberals refuse to answer that one very simple, straightforward question. And in the absence of an answer to that question, one is inevitably led to the conclusion that they are trying to hide something, whether it is members of this committee doing it willfully, or whether it is direction from the top that they cannot allow these answers to be given. Whatever the case is, quite frankly, that's their internal policies, and I would suggest an attitude that has led them to the situation that they're in today. But when it comes down to it, Chair, what this committee needs to get to the bottom of is that very simple question, and then we can proceed very logically after that point. But the one question I would hope that all members of this committee, and I understand that there's some question marks around the conduct of these companies and contracts, including some government contracts and some very, very suspicious things. I know when the minister came before this committee, that was one of the most partisan attitudes that I've ever seen a minister of the Crown present before committee. But he, members of the Liberal Party, and so many others simply refuse to answer the very, very basic question of who is this Randy in question. So my encouragement to all members, to you, Mr. Chair, and to those who are watching, is until there is a forthrightness and willingness on the Liberals to answer that simple question, the inevitable conclusion, rather, is that they are trying to cover up and hide something damning. So I would simply leave it there, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Couric. I've got Ms. Damoff next, followed by Mr. Housefather. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. First, I want to offer to Mr. Green that it was his, Minister Boissonneau's personal phone records that were provided to the committee. And I have a question through you, Chair, to the clerk. Has the request ever been provided to Minister Boissonneau to provide the information that was asked of him from the committee? I know he provided his phone records proactively, but have we ever requested that information from him? Yes. I asked, Chair, I asked you, not Mr. Brock.
Yeah, I'm going to, the information that, I'm going to leave that to the clerk to respond to. Madam Clerk, I know that we did ask for the phone records. That was one of the requests. Had there been any others that you had acted on? I'll let you address the committee on that.
I have not specifically sent an email to flag the questions because it's really the responsibility of the minister if he wants to answer or not to the questions. Questions were asked, he has access to the blues and he can send the information.
Thank you.
Does that clear it up?
Yeah, it does. But I want to clarify because Mr. Green had said that we needed to see his personal phone records, and I just wanted to clarify that what he provided were his personal phone records. Any other phone that he might have, be it ministerial, would be a whole, well, first of all, he wouldn't and shouldn't be using a government phone for personal business. When I deal with my Terry Fox Run stuff, I'm using my personal email account, and we all do that with our personal business. And I also would like to make just a comment on Mr. Couric saying that we were filibustering. I think through yesterday and today, we've put forward an amendment today. Thank you to my colleague, Ms. Khalid. But I sat through days. In fact, Mr. Couric was there when the Conservatives were filibustering Bill C-21. And it was into the night for hours and hours and hours with no productive amendments put forward, abuse of public servants who were there at the time. So I don't think that I don't think we need Mr. Couric mumbling to me, Chair, as I'm trying to.
Point of order, Chair. Point of order.
He's mumbling under his breath. He's not disrupting the committee hearings. If he was, I would stop him. But I do have a point of order from Mr. Barrett. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I loathe to intervene because I know it upsets the other side if we raise anything that they say in front of a 4K camera and a microphone. But and they claim that they're never interrupted, but only interrupted. But yesterday, Ms. Damoff was very sure that we must be that there.
I'm waiting to hear it.
That there must be relevance in what we're talking about. And again, there were cries foul about interruptions, and we've got it happening right now. Rules for me, but not for thee. The relevance. The relevance.
He's claiming relevance. He's claiming relevance.
And relentless interruption. So,
Go ahead,
so the liberal members don't like to be interrupted, but like to interrupt. They don't
Thank you,
allow
Mr.
for
Barrett.
leniency on relevance, but
it.
expect it.
I get
so,
it. Thank you.
She's talking about C-21. That didn't happen at this committee.
Yeah, and again, I try to give a wide latitude, expecting that members are going to come back. We are on the sub-amendment. Ms. Damoff, on the sub-amendment, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I was talking about the accusation of filibustering and giving examples of my colleagues across the way who filibustered and do it quite regularly, actually. And
Go ahead, Ms. Damoff, please.
it's difficult to have a conversation, Chair, when I'm just going to say I think that we need to be respectful. And, you know, to Mr. Barrett's point about us not liking being interrupted, the issues that I have are when clips are taken, especially when they're taken out of context and put on Twitter, which I'm quite certain has driven horrific traffic to Ms. Khalid over, why do I keep saying your name wrong, Ikra? I'm sorry, Ms. Khalid. So anyway, I'm supportive of what has been put forward by Ms. Khalid, and will be supporting it. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Housefather, on the sub-amendment, sir, and open up your mic. No, it's down. It's down. We're not hearing you, Mr. Housefather.
Maybe click on the side.
Maybe what?
Maybe click on the side of the headset.
Click on the side of the headset if you can. See if that works.
Yeah, is that okay, Mr. Chair? Can you hear me?
It's better. Yep. Yeah, just bring
Okay,
the
I'm so
boom boom down a little bit more, and I think it'll become clearer, Mr. Housefather. Go ahead.
Thank you.
On the sub-amendment.
Yes, on the sub-amendment. So Mr. Chair, I think that there's just a couple of things I wanted to say. First of all, the Ethics Commissioner had told us that he had felt that there was nothing further to investigate on issues other than now the new question of who Randy is in these text messages. So I agree. The one question the committee needs to actually understand is who is the Randy in the text messages. I think everyone here on all sides is unaware of the answer to that. We all have our own presumptions, our own ideas, but what's happening is people are now speculating idly, and the real question is, how do you find out? So to me, Mr. Barrett's original proposal calls for the company to release the names of all of the different employees. Who is to say that this Randy is an employee of the company? Randy could be a consultant. Randy could be somebody else. So Mr. Barrett's proposal doesn't resolve the question of who Randy is by simply producing a list of employees. You could argue that it's overbreadth to produce all the employees. To me, the answer is to ask the company, who is Randy? Ask Mr. Anderson, who is Randy? Ask Mr. Anderson these questions. So to me, the list of employees was irrelevant. The question to ask the company is, who is Randy? At least Ms. Khalid's sub-amendment requires Mr. Anderson to produce his text messages for that day, and we'll see what number this comes from. And presumably from at least the text messages that Mr. Anderson put out on September the 8th, we'll have all of these answers. So I prefer Ms. Khalid's sub-amendment to the original amendment, because the original amendment doesn't actually necessarily tell us who Randy is, because it provides a list of employees from this company, and nobody is to say that Randy was an employee. He could have been a consultant, or she could have been a consultant. We don't even know if it's a guy. So in any case, I will vote for Ms. Khalid's sub-amendment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Green, have you, followed by Mr. Barrett. Go ahead, sir, on the sub-amendment.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate Mr. Housefather's intervention. He makes a very compelling case to call Mr. Anderson as a witness. That was the intention, you know, and we end up down these other rabbit holes, right? So I am for that. I just want to ask you, Mr. Chair, and I've kind of lost track between the sub-amendments and amendments. Where are we with that? Have we now, based on the last votes, removed our ability to call any witnesses, and we're now just relying on this, or does that still exist?
No,
the original motion?
So the main motion called for, was amended and still calls for two witnesses to be called, Mr. Anderson and Ms. Poon. The amendment that was proposed by Mr. Barrett calls on the employee list, correct me if I'm wrong, Madam Clerk, the employee list with Randy to be submitted within 7 days of passing of the motion, and we are now on the sub-amendment of Ms. Khalid that calls on the phone records for Mr. Anderson. That's where we're at. So nothing has stopped us or precluded us from having those two witnesses appear, because
good.
it's still part of the main motion.
Apologize.
Yeah, no, that's
the
fine.
twists and turns are sometimes hard to follow. Now, given that it's a sub-amendment, I'm to understand procedurally there can't be a sub-amendment to a sub-amendment, correct?
That's correct. So
in order to deal with this matter,
we would have to deal with this matter and then come back on the amendment.
Okay.
And then only then
I'll
can a sub-amendment be moved, Mr. Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I
Okay.
appreciate your handling of this meeting. I know it's probably not easy in person there. It's kind of torture to experience online, but here I am. So at the appropriate time, I will be moving an amendment to Mr. Barrett's original motion that would extend his motion to include the language of employees and consultants, because I think Mr. Housefather raises a good point. And hopefully the question of who Alibi Randy is may emerge that way. Thank you.
Mr. Green, so we're still on the sub-amendment, and I have Mr. Barrett on the sub-amendment.
Thanks very much, Chair. So I wanted to just refer to Krista Hesse from Global News published an article on June 4th, 2024. And Ms. Hesse has in the article here of questions to Mr. Anderson. When asked if he worked with another Randy, Anderson stated that he did, but would not disclose the employee's full name. He said the other Randy was head of logistics. So I do want to note that. We have we do have a challenge when we're looking for records from this company, I think. It's not because of the size of the company, a handful of employees. But of course, there is the matter of the fire. There is the matter of the fire that may cause a challenge for us in getting records from the company. Because on September 25th, 2022, GHI Edmonton's unit was set ablaze. And detectives working alongside Edmonton Fire Rescue Services determined that the fire had been deliberately set following a break and enter to the premises, destroying inventory and records. So this, of course, preceded the lawsuits that followed with GHI, and of course the Gowie Group made a $7.3 million claim for loss and damages. Now, there is the claim on the missing money, the outstanding money, that the intention from GHI was that they would pay Gowie back with insurance money, and we're unsure about if there had been if the deposit was used to procure product or what had taken place there. But many questions abound after that fire, including if they have a list of their employees. But the public reporting is that Alibi Randy, is an employee. But I think that to just capture it all, yes, let's ask for contractors, subcontractors, consultants, employees who are named Randy. Simply getting phone records and not other Randy is a problem, because other Randy and Mr. Anderson, we don't know the application that they were using for communication. There's too many messaging apps that are in common use to enumerate, but or to list, to itemize, I should say, but we don't know. And simply because someone ought not use their phone for something that it is therefore excluded from the interest of the committee in getting an answer, like that's not sufficient. So we would need to see messages from all messaging apps, and we would need to see call logs from all calling apps for both Mr. Anderson and the minister, Randy, as part of our inquiry into who the other Randy is. But that's not a conclusion. And certainly having Mr. Anderson come before committee to answer questions, Mr. Anderson would be forewarned that question one is the first and last name of other Randy or Randeep. Alibi Randy. We need to know. So that's going to be question one. So of course Mr. Anderson must come to the committee, but we need answers to our questions. An exhaustive review of communications logs from all telecommunication devices owned by Mr. Anderson is the only way to give credibility to this question here. And barring that expansion, then we can't support this. Like, look, we've gone from having Gowie Group, Anderson, Poon, and other Randy come to committee to just to eliminating the subject of the messages, the third party, to eliminating other Randy, which is the question in front of us, and now there's the suggestion that we'll get these messages. We're going to amend the motion to get messages from one device, and potentially eliminate the call for the other two witnesses. Come on. That dog's not going to hunt. We're going to need to see all messages, all call logs, all devices owned by Mr. Anderson, and the same for the minister. That's if we're going to follow this thread on devices, it needs to be complete. That's what Mr. Brock asked for, and the clerk might not have sent a note to the minister, but he was here, he heard the request, and he also had a gaggle of staff with him who I'm certain minuted the request, and I'm sure that they watched the game tape after and saw that the request was there. And the one phone just isn't sufficient. It just isn't sufficient that what went through his wireless provider is it. I can say with a great deal of certainty that almost everyone in this room, members and others, members and strangers, use applications for messaging other than the native messaging app on their phone. Wicker, WhatsApp, here we go, let's name some. I know people use Facebook Messenger often. I find that surprising, but to each their own. People DM on Instagram. Snapchat. I don't know. I don't think people use it to instant message, but there's an app called Be Real that people really like. So there's lots, but Skype, Teams, Zoom, people will make calls on those as well. People will instant message on those. So a variety of encrypted and unencrypted messaging apps, and they're quite common in government, in politics, in military and civilian applications. So it's just really a half-hearted in its current form, and so we'd need more meat on those bones because this thing has been pared down so much. We've gotten away from the penultimate question, who is other Randy?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Barrett. I have Mr. Brock next. Go ahead, Mr. Brock.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Barrett, my colleague, stole a little bit of my thunder because I was going to bring to the attention of this entire group that simply getting all communications potentially between the minister and Mr. Anderson only scratches the surface. As Mr. Barrett has indicated, there are so many applications out there, and I know personally the frustration that I have with my teenage daughters who use Snapchat for the sole purpose that there does not allow anyone to retain the actual message. It's a moment in time, and it literally disappears within 10 or 15 seconds. So it would be foolhardy for anyone, I believe, on this committee to believe that the minister, as experienced as he is, would be that naive to actually use his own cell phone, or to Ms. Damoff's point, to use his government cell phone and to implicate himself in a serious violation under the Conflict of Interest Act in terms of benefiting himself while a minister of the Crown. It would be foolish. And I don't think for 1 minute he did that. But it's a step. And it was a step that I thought was necessary because, and I wholeheartedly agree with my colleague, Mr. Couric, that the display that we all witnessed from Mr. Boissonneau was one for the ages. And I have been privileged to attend numerous committees since my election in 21, but nowhere have I ever seen the complete lack of respect for the process and the hyper-partisanship of the minister. Literally right out of the gate, he had an agenda and he wanted to distract this committee. We're not going to allow that to happen. And sometimes I think that my Liberal colleagues simply don't want an opposition, they want an audience.
Right.
And whenever we ask the tough questions, we're maligned by them, we are criticized by them. Well, quite frankly, this is the role of the opposition. And for those members I'm staring at right now who may have the privilege of being reelected, although I think the odds are slim to nil in the next election, they're going to have the ability to be an opposition MP. And they're going to obviously change their mindset because they're going to want transparency and accountability with their government. So going back to reflecting on the original motion, the amendment, the sub-amendment, we're losing track of the evidence that we do have before you. And I think it's important that I talk about evidence because Ms. Khalid talked about evidence over politics or evidence versus politics. So the questions that we put to this committee in the filibuster, and this is exactly what it is. Ms. Damoff may be offended by that, but that's exactly what she has been doing as well as her colleagues. We have heard some evidence. We've heard some evidence from the minister himself. We have received evidence by way of media reports. That's not political. They may not like the message. They may not like the content, but that does. So again, Chair, Ms. Khalid and Ms. Damoff had some issues about me talking over them when they had the floor. And again, they display the absolute lack of respect for me and this process. So I am going to be calling them both out for talking over my time at the mic.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Brock, you have the floor.
So the evidence, I guess we need a refresher on the evidence. And I'm going to reflect on what the minister had to say. The minister made it abundantly clear that he has complied with all the rules, that he has retained a 50% interest in his business with Mr. Anderson, and the rules allow that. Many members have businesses on the side. But as a minister, he can't have a controlling interest in that company, essentially a silent partner. He confirmed in evidence when he attended that he considers himself a partner in this small two-person company, his other partner being Mr. Stephen Anderson. So that's the first piece of evidence. Now, I'm taking a look at the actual text exchanges between Mr. Anderson and potentially the minister. And it's dated September the 8th, 2022. Stephen Anderson states as follows, "What is going on? I just received this from Randy." Now, this is a text message that he is sending to someone at Gawi. Anderson, so the person, the other Randy or the minister, Randy Boissonneau, doesn't call Stephen by his first name, is simply Anderson. It's 1314 MST and 1514 EST. It literally takes 10 seconds to complete a transfer. I am telling you, we are in capital letters, Mr. Chair, not allocating like this. Please reach out and see what the reason is now. You assured me this morning, so I'll stop right there. You assured me this morning. Was that a telephone call? Was that another text exchange between the minister and Mr. Anderson? Don't know. But it appears just by reading between the lines that the failure of Gawi to make this deposit had been an ongoing concern. So I know that I originally had asked for records of September the 8th, 2022. It may find favor with all committee members if perhaps we go back 30 or 60 days. of all communications between the minister and Mr. Anderson, because it tells me that this is an ongoing issue and concern. You assured me this morning this was done first thing and allowed you to hold this stock today. Stock. So this is the stock that was supposed to be delivered to Gawi that mysteriously burned up in a deliberately set fire. It's midday and nothing is completed. I am calling, so this is the other Randy, or it's the minister. I am calling Felix to discuss. Now, who is Felix? We've heard that name before. According to Mr. Anderson, Felix' surname is Papineau, and he is Stephen Anderson's right-hand man in Quebec. I am calling Felix to discuss. Be available in 15 for a, wait for it, partner call. Not consultant call, not intern call, not employee to partner call, partner to partner. Minister Boissonnault, a partner. His own words confirms I'm a partner with Mr. Anderson. So that's evidence. That's not conjecture. That's not a witch hunt. This is real evidence shared to Canadians by Global News. Now, the reporter for Global News obviously asked a number of questions. When asked if he worked with another Randy, this is the reporter to Mr. Anderson, Anderson stated that he did, but would not disclose the employee's full name. Well, of course, his partner wants to protect Minister Boissonnault. He knows what the rules are, and Mr. Boissonnault can't be involved in the day-to-day affairs as a minister of the Crown. So conveniently, he declines to provide the name of the alibi Randy or the other Randy. He said the other Randy was head of logistics. And I referenced this yesterday, Mr. Chair, in my discussion at committee. Head of logistics. Well, as any good reporter would do, in this case, she did not accept that at face value. She conducted further interviews. She spoke with GHI's former suppliers, Edward Anderson, who is the father of the partner Stephen Anderson. He was identified as the company's logistics lead. His email signature had the title of Logistics Supply Chain at GHI in 2021, according to emails viewed by Global. She reached out to Mr. Anderson. He too declined to comment. He too declined to identify who the other Randy is, because again, he's the father of one of the partners, the other partner. He wants to protect the business relationship between his son and the minister, so of course he's going to decline no comment. She also reached out to Felix Papineau. I referenced that, Anderson's right-hand man in Quebec, and Shauna Parker, Anderson's sister. Again, both declined to respond to questions. And I referenced this yesterday, and I'm going to highlight it today. Mr. Anderson deliberately lied to the reporter when he said that the other Randy, or the alibi Randy, is head of logistics. It was his actual father. It wasn't. It wasn't the other Randy. It was the other. It was his father. Now, this is why we, in our original motion, wanted a representative of Galway here, because they are part of this and they have a different perspective and a different interest. They're not here to protect Minister Boissonnault. Quite frankly, they want to get paid back the money that they lost or the product that they originally contracted for. They're out of pocket. So they reached out, or the reporter reached out to Galway. And I'm going to read out this passage in the press release because I think it's quite telling. It was Galway's understanding during that text message that I referenced on September the 8th that Anderson was referring to Boissonneau, Minister Boissonneau. Not an intern, not an employee, not a consultant, not GC Strategies, not McKinsey, Minister Boissonneau, whom Anderson had told her, previous conversation, Chair, Anderson had told her was a partner in GHI and, wait for it, a public official. Not only confirming Minister Boissonneau's partnership status, but also his political status. A public official. This was confirmed by Galway. They confirmed, we have had no direct communication with Mr. Boissonneau at any point in our dealings with Stephen. Well, of course not. He's not that naive to physically pick up the phone and write directly to Galway. He's going to do that through back channels. He's going to deal with that through his partner, Mr. Anderson. So Anderson, again, was asked further questions, would not respond regarding any of the nuances towards the towards the text. Then the story goes on and talks about how GHI has been embroiled in lawsuits, even though Mr. Boissonneau, Randy Boissonneau, the minister, was listed as director of the company for more than a year after his re-election. Now, going back to Galway, so it looks like as a result of the intervention of either the minister or the other Randy, they ended up later that day sending nearly $500,000 as a deposit to Anderson. Company says it never got the gloves it was contractually promised, and all that money was stolen. Mr. Anderson and GHI deny that claim, and coincidentally and suspiciously, 16 days after Galway wires the deposit, a fire breaks out that the police say was deliberately set after a break and enter, and all product, including records, including all invoices, literally gone up in smoke. The author of the report opines why a former politician, referencing the minister, and a hockey coach, referencing Mr. Anderson, launched a PPE business in the industry's most tumultuous time remains a mystery. However, court documents and interviews with suppliers and buyers who did business with GHI reveal the inner workings of a startup fraught with problems from the start. In lawsuits against GHI dating back to 2021, suppliers claim the company did not pay for products they delivered. On May the 3rd, the minister told Global News, "When I was running the company, all of the bills were paid," quote unquote. Court documents dispute that statement. A lawsuit filed by supplier Patterson Dental against GHI about 2 weeks after Boissonneau's re-election claims the company did not pay 15 invoices between November 2020 and January 2021, totaling just under $400,000. And I think, sir, that I made my point in terms of evidence versus politics versus conjecture. This is not a witch hunt. This is a function that any opposition member, particularly at this committee, would want to do, determine who this other Randy is. That is the $64 million question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brock. I've exhausted the list on the sub-amendment. So do we have consensus on the sub-amendment to adopt it? No. No, we don't? Okay, so I'm going to call.
Mr. Villemur's gone to the bathroom. Oh, he's back.
Yep. Okay, so we are on
wait,
the
there's
sub-amendment vote. We've exhausted the speaking list on that. We don't have consensus. Madam Clerk, go ahead with the vote, please.
On the sub-amendment moved by Ms. Khalid, Mr. Baines,
Yes.
Ms. Damoff,
Yes?
Mr. Fisher,
Oui.
Mr. Hauswater,
Yes.
Ms. Khalid,
Yes.
Mr. Barrett,
Nope.
Mr. Brock,
No.
Mr. Kirk,
No.
Monsieur Villemur,
Pour.
Mr. Green,
No.
Yeas 6 pour 6, nays 4 contre 4.
Okay, so the sub-amendment does carry. We're back on the amendment for the motion. Do we have any speakers on the amendment? As amended. Ms. Damoff, go ahead.
I thought the amendment carried yesterday, so now we would be on the main motion, Chair. Am I confused here?
Just give me a second here.
I could be wrong.
So just to confirm, and thanks the clerk for this, the bloc did move an amendment. Mr. Desilets, who was here, that was adopted. And then Mr. Barrett moved an amendment, which led to the sub-amendment, which was just adopted. So we're on the amendment to the motion as amended. Does that make sense?
Chair, could you read the motion in its current form for us?
And I'll not be able to do it out of my head, but we will just give me a second here. Madam Clerk, you're on top of this, I know. Can you?
Do you want me to read or distribute?
I would rather you read.
Okay.
Okay. And distribute. Yeah.
Well,
Not sure exactly where we are right now.
I will read, then distribute, because I cannot talk and distribute at the same time. There we go. So, give me a second there. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Randy's getting away.
Thank you. So sorry about the noise in the room and all that. Thank you, the analyst, for that. So the text of the motion, as amended now twice, would read that in light of media report, Minister Randy Boissonnault testimony at this committee and the Ethics Commissioner's confirmation that he is considering opening another investigation into Minister Randy Boissonnault's action, the committee call on the following witnesses to appear before the committee and testify for 1 hour. A. Stephen Anderson. B. Kristen Poon. And now we're getting to the motion as amended, that the committee requests that Stephen Anderson produce for the committee all of his phone records and text messages from September 8, 2022, within 7 days of this motion being adopted.
So that's where we're at right now. So I'll take a couple of minutes. I'm gonna allow the clerk to put it all together and send it out to committee members, and We are going to suspend for a couple of minutes so that you can have a look at this. just for clarification, everybody has the motion as amended. So right now, we are on the amendment that was put forward by Mr. Barrett, that was amended by Ms. Khalid. And I have Monsieur Villemur premier, suivi par Monsieur Barrett. Monsieur Villemur, commencez s'il vous plaît.
Monsieur Villemur, you have the floor. Thank you, Chair. It's unfortunate that I wasn't here yesterday because apparently I missed some interesting discussions. I would like to remind my colleagues that we're here not exactly looking for truth, but we want to respect the public's interest. And in cases like these, questions need to be asked and answers need to be found. I think we also need to keep in mind that beyond those questions and answers, we have work to do. We have a report that we need to look at. We need to finish our study on TikTok. We need to finish our study on disinformation. And we've spent 5 meetings trying to figure out who Randy is. I'm not saying that it's not a valid question, but we need to also find a balance between the pros and cons. Where are we going with this? And so I would like to ask my colleagues for us to be able to solve this issue in front of us quickly. But we need to keep in mind the public interest. And it goes beyond knowing who Randy is. Thank you. Thank you, Monsieur Villemur.
Go ahead, please.
Chair, I'd like to move an amendment. So where the motion reads, and that the committee requests that Stephen Anderson and Randy Boissonneau would be added. Produce for the committee all of his, we would replace with the word their, phone records and text messages, and add iMessages and all instant messages, and calls from all applications from September 8th, 2022, within 7 days of this motion being adopted.
Has that been shared? Have you shared that with the clerk at this point? Okay, so you're gonna have to repeat that very, very, very slowly, Mr. Barrett, if you don't mind, or
I'll send it to the clerk.
Okay, so send it to the clerk if you don't mind. Thanks. We have resources till 1:30, so I'm going to have to suspend because I'm going to need it distributed to all the members of the committee in both languages. So we are going to suspend again. patience of everyone, but the clerk has sent the sub-amendment proposed by Mr. Barrett to everyone, and the sub-amendment would read, and the committee requests that Stephen Anderson and Randy Boissonneau produce for the committee all of their phone records, text messages, iMessages, and all instant messages and call logs for all applications from September 8th, 2022, within 7 days of this motion being adopted. Mr. Barrett. Okay. Ms. Damoff.
Thanks, Chair. We won't be supporting the amendment. I will remind the committee that the committee already asked Mr. Boissonneau for his phone records. And Chair, I wanted to just read what happened that day because there was no follow-up. You said, "Thank you, Mr. Green. On that, I'm going to ask the clerk on your behalf, sir, to review the Hansard, to submit the questions that have been asked of Mr. Boissonneau and have him respond to the committee. Madam Clerk, just make a note of the time on that." And then you said, "Thank you, sir. I'm going to take that as a request from Mr. Brock, and again, I'm going to ask the clerk to follow up on that request." Mr. Boissonneau is attempting to get the records for his ministerial phone. It's not as easy as submitting the records from his personal phone, which he proactively submitted to the committee. So we won't support the amendment from Mr. Barrett, and I hope that this doesn't turn into a fishing expedition, that we can deal with this motion this afternoon and move on. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Damoff. I don't have anybody else on the speaking list on the sub-amendment. Mr. Barrett?
I'm just wondering if we can do a sound check with Mr. Green there, Mr. Chair.
I mean, his sound was fine before.
Mr. Green is actually not sitting.
He's not in his chair.
The chair is empty.
Oh, there he is. Okay. Mr. Green, good to have you back. We see you. Wonderful. Okay. So I don't have anybody else on the speaking list, so I'm going to call the vote on Mr. Barrett's sub-amendment if we don't have consensus. We don't have consensus. Okay. Madam Clerk, go ahead.
Vote is on the sub-amendment from Mr. Barrett. Mr. Baines.
No.
Ms. Damoff.
No?
Mr. Fisher.
No.
Mr. Hausfather.
No.
Ms. Kelly.
No.
Mr. Barrett.
Yes.
Mr. Brock.
Yes.
Mr. Kurek.
Yes.
Monsieur Villemur.
Oui.
Mr. Green.
Yes.
Yeas 5, 9, 5.
And I vote yes.
Yeas 6, nays 5.
So the sub-amendment carries. We are now on the amendment. Any further discussion on the amendment? I don't see any. So on the amendment, do we have consensus on the amendment? Do we have consensus on the amendment? On division? On division? Okay. Okay, so we have division. That's fine. Okay, so that carries. And now we are on the main motion as amended. Okay. Did you want to speak on the main motion, Mr. Fisher? Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I spoke at length on and shared my thoughts on how I disagreed with bringing people before this committee, regular Canadians, through to the front of this committee and having them interrogated and have them potentially receive vitriolic social media feedback and hyper-partisan questions at committee. But I'm going to support the motion. I feel that, and I've talked about how committees can do really, really good work, and how I've been disappointed in the fact that committees have sort of gone down a real partisan road. But I do see the last 3 days of hard work by all parties and all parliamentarians here to get to a point, and I'm willing to accept that there is some form of consensus with all the work that's been done. So although I've said very regularly that I'm not in support of bringing regular Canadians before this committee to face what I really hope isn't going to be a firing squad, but due to the hard work the committee has put in, I'll support this motion.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fisher. I don't see any further discussion on this, so I'm going to ask that we have consensus on, do we have consensus on the main motion as amended? You want to call the roll? Okay. So I'm going to get Madam Clerk to call the roll. Madam Clerk, go ahead, please.
The vote is on the main motion as amended. Mr. Baines.
Yes.
Ms. Damoff.
Yes.
Mr. Fisher.
Wait.
Mr. Hauswater.
Oui.
Ms. Khalid.
Yes.
Mr. Barrett.
Yes.
Mr. Brock.
Yes.
Mr. Currick.
Yes.
Monsieur Fortin.
Oui.
Mr. Green.
Yes.
Yeas 10 pour 10.
Okay, so the motion as amended carries. Mr. Barrett, I see your hand. Go ahead.
I'd like to move to adjourn.
Okay, we have a motion to adjourn. Do I have consensus? Mr. Green, I see your thumb up. Monsieur Fortin? Wait. Okay, we are adjourned.